Hello and welcome to Owning the Narrative. I am Bulow. The show will feature the top news of the week, complete with my observations, and even a little bit of sarcasm thrown in. The top news stories will be taken from my morning news briefings that I write on the Rick Bulow New Media blog every weekday morning. If you go on to like what you see, smash that thumbs up button. And now, let's go right into the news. The Olympics are set to start in about a month from now, and there's already some controversy amongst the Olympic trials. Now, there have been controversies in the past, with two black Americans holding up their fists during the 1968 Olympics. And of course, you have the whole Russia was Soviet Union, United States controversy in 1972 with basketball gold medal. This one is during the Olympic trials, and found this from the Associated Press, so let's get right to there. Says message sent, Berry turns away from flag during Anthem. For the past week, they played the national anthem one time a night at the U.S. Olympic track and field trials. On Saturday, the song just happened instead while outspoken activist Gwen Berry was standing at the podium after receiving her bronze medal in the hammer throw. While the music played, Berry placed her left hand on her hip and shuffled her feet. She took a quarter turn so she was facing the stands, not the flag. Toward the end, she plucked up her black t-shirt with the words activist athlete emblazoned on the front and draped it over her head. I feel like it was a setup and they did it on purpose, Berry said of the timing of the anthem. I was PO'd, to be honest. Berry's reaction to the Star-Spangled Banner took its fair share of the spotlight on a blazing hot second-to-last day at trials that featured some blazing fast times. Gabby Thomas became the second fastest woman ever in the 200, winning the final in 21.61 seconds. The only woman faster, Florence Griffith Joyner. And as expected, Grant Holloway won the 110-meter hurdles, though his time in the semifinals was the eye-opener. His 12.81 was only 1/100th of a second off the world mark. Other winners Saturday included Emily Sisson in the 10,000, Katie Nagild in the pole vault, Maggie Malone in the javelin, Ray Benjamin in the 400 hurdles, and Brittany Reese in the long jump. Not winning, Allison Felix, who finished 5th in the 200, but had already secured her spot in the 400. Also, Noah Lyles finished 2nd in his 200 semifinal and looked somewhat shocked to see that 17-year-old Arian Knighton had beaten him to the line. Knighton finished in 1988 to top an under 20 world record that had been held by none other than Usain Bolt. Earlier, with temperatures reaching 101 degrees on the field, Berry earned her spot on her platform at the Tokyo Olympics, grabbing the third spot by a scant 2 inches over Janie Casanavoid. Berry has promised to use her position to keep raising awareness about social injustices in her home country. My purpose and my mission is bigger than sports, Berry said. I am here to represent those who died due to systemic racism. That's the important part. That's why I'm going. That's why I'm here today. She found it to be no matter of importance that she was put in center during the anthem. Unlike the Olympics, they don't play anthems to accompany medal ceremonies at the trials. But the hammer throwers received their rewards just before the start of the evening session, which has been kicking off all week to a video rendition of the Star-Spangled Banner played on the scoreboard. USA Track and Field spokeswoman Susan Hazard said, the national anthem was scheduled to play at 5:20 p.m. today. We didn't wait until the athletes were on the podium for the hammer throw awards. The national anthem is played every day according to a previously published schedule. On Saturday, the music started at 5:25. And so, while winner Deanna Price and second-place finisher Brooke Anderson stood tall on the podium with their hands over their hearts and stared straight ahead at the American and Oregon flags, Berry fidgeted and paced on the third step. then turned away and finally grabbed her t-shirt. They said they were going to play it before we walked out, then they played it when we were out there, Berry said. But I don't really want to talk about the anthem because that's not important. The anthem doesn't speak for me, it never has. Berry's gestures grew virtually no reaction from the still filling stands, and there was something far less than 2 summers ago when she raised her fist on the podium after winning the Pan Am Games. That demonstration led to a sanction, but ultimately pushed the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Committee to commit to not punishing athletes who raise fists or kneel at the trials or in Tokyo. It's a potential flashpoint for Tokyo, where the IOC has said that it will enforce its Rule 50 that bans demonstrations inside the lines. It's the same prohibition that got sprinters Tommy Smith and John Carlos sent home from the Mexico City Games in 1968. And now Berry will be heading to her second Olympics, and she saw what it will take to earn anything close to a similar moment in Tokyo. Price won with a throw of 263 feet 6 inches or 80.31 meters, which was nearly 7 feet longer than Berry's throw. Price, who became only the second woman in history to crack 80 meters, had no problem sharing the stage with Berry. I think people should say whatever they want to say. I'm proud of her, Price said. She figures to be going for gold along with world record holder Anita Włodarczyk of Poland, who was expected to be in Japan. Meanwhile, Anderson's throw was a mere 2 inches shy of Perry's personal best. Berry said she needed to get my mind right, my body right, and my spirit right for the Olympics. The women's hammer throw starts August 1st, but she doesn't think she needs to be on the platform in Tokyo to have an impact. I don't need to do anything sport-wise, she said. What I need to do is speak for my community, to represent my community, and to help my community, because that's more important than sports. Now, I do agree with her on that part. However, my opinion, the Olympics is putting national pride on the line, and, I mean, there's a lot of controversy going on in sports surrounding the national anthem, Star Spangled Banner. I mean, you had Colin Kaepernick starting it off with kneeling during the Star Spangled Banner. Then you had many people not participating, opting to hang back in their dressing rooms at times for all sports. And you have had a few kneelers and basically some who just don't do anything, but if you play, okay, to me, if you play a sport, don't bring politics into it. I mean, that is the worst possible place for politics to take place, is in sports. I mean, people watch sports, they watch movies to get away from the political atmosphere. That's just not the case to do it in. And oh, by the way, there are a few more articles on it. This from CNN. Gwen Berry turns away from flag at U.S. Olympic trials podium, says she was set up. Hammersville Gwen Berry says that the playing of the Star Spangled of the national anthem while she was at the podium at the U.S. Olympic track and field trials was set up. Berry turned away from the flag to face the stands while the Star Spangled Banner played during the medal ceremony on Saturday. She then draped a t-shirt bearing the words "activist athlete" over her head, having placed third in the hammer event at the trials in Eugene, Oregon. Berry earned a spot on the team for the Tokyo Olympics, which get underway next month. I feel like it was set up. I feel that they did that on purpose, and I was PO, to be honest, said Berry, of the anthem being played while she was on the podium. I was thinking about what should I do. Eventually, I just stayed there and just swayed. I put my shirt over my head. It was real disrespectful. I know they did that on purpose, but it'll be alright. I see what's up. USA Track and Field did not respond to CNN's request for comment, but according to Reuters, it said that the anthem was played each day at the trials according to a prearranged schedule. We didn't wait until the athletes were on the podium for the Hammersville Awards, said USATF spokeswoman Susan Hazard. We're thrilled with women's hammer throw team that selected themselves for the games. By the way, the anthem has been played once each evening throughout the trials. They said that they were going to play it before we walked out, and they played it when we were out there, said Berry, according to ESPN. But I don't really want to talk about the anthem because that's not important. The anthem doesn't speak for me, it never has. On Instagram, Berry added a caption alongside photos of her on the podium saying, I said what I said, I meant what I said. Stop playing with me, period. Then on Twitter, Berry said how comments on social media shows that even after the murder of George Floyd and so many others, the commercials, statements, and phony sentiments regarding Black lives were just a hoax. In 2019, Berry lost some of her sponsorships after raising her fist in protest on the podium at the Pan American Games in Peru. She received a 12-month probation from the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Committee for the act, which she says was meant to highlight social injustice in America. For me, it was extremely devastating because they cut off all my revenue. The 31-year-old Berry told CNN of the situation last year. Competing, going overseas, going into competitions, getting prize money, and then ultimately making the Olympic team help me, help my family, help my community. In an open letter to athletes earlier this year, U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Committee CEO Susan Hirschland outlined how respectful demonstrations on the topic of racial and social justice would be allowed at the Olympic and Paralympic trials. Now, while we support your right to demonstrate peacefully in support of racial and social justice, we cannot control the actions others may take in response, the letter said. However, a ban on protests and demonstrations at the Tokyo Olympics will be in place after the International Olympic Committee upheld Rule 50, which states that no kind of demonstration or political, religious, or racial propaganda permitted in any Olympic sites, venues, or other areas. And I mean, it'll be interesting to see just what happens during the Olympics at this. You know, I mean, to me it just spells of outright disrespect and shame. But you know, other people have their opinions, and I honor that. As a matter of fact, there's this from the Huffington Post. Excuse me. Black activist athlete Gwen Berry turns back on flag during Anthem at Olympic trials. And outspoken black activist athlete Gwen Berry turned her back on the American flag as the national anthem played at the U.S. Olympic track and field trials this weekend. Berry, a hammer thrower, also put her t-shirt over her head to protest racism. After she was awarded a bronze medal Saturday at the trials in Eugene, Oregon, the student with the shirt read activist athlete. Now, unlike at the Olympics where the anthem of an athlete's nation is played when medals are awarded, the anthem at the trials is played only once each evening. Berry told reporters that it seemed like a setup that the anthem was played just as she was on the podium, given her well-known views against racism in the country. I feel like it was a setup and they did it on purpose. Berry said of the timing, according to the Associated Press. And just as I had mentioned in the article, or in the AP article that I had read earlier, Berry emphasized to reporters that her purpose and mission is bigger than sports. I'm here to represent those who died due to systemic racism. What I need to do is speak for my country, to represent my country, and to help my community. What I need to do is speak for my community, to represent for my community, and to help my community because that's more important than sports, she added. A USA track and field spokesperson told CNN that the anthem plays at a set time each day, and we didn't wait for the athletes to be on the podium. Berry tweeted out, "Stop playing with me." The other two hammer throw winners, first place winner Deanna Price and runner-up Brooke Anderson, remained on the podium facing the flag with hands over their hearts. An overwhelming number of people responding to Berry's tweets about the incident were positive. Predictably, Fox News and right-wing former Wisconsin GOP Governor Scott Walker complained against it. What's wrong with these people, Walker asked. Former chief of the Office of Government Ethics, Walter Shaw, pointed out to Walker that what's actually unpatriotic is lying about presidential elections and inciting insurrections. Walker tweeted out, "What's wrong with people growing up? Everyone stood for the American flag. Didn't matter your politics, race, sex, income, religion. Everyone stood for the flag. It was one of those civic rituals that brought us together, so should today." To which Walter Shaw replied, "What's unpatriotic is lying about not losing elections and inciting insurrections at the Capitol building. Voter suppression is unpatriotic too, so is rejecting anti-corruption legislation." Den of Thieves tweeted out, "It's called living in a democracy, not a nation wrapped in a flag, carrying a Bible." Eric Halverson tweeted out, "Is this your preferred ritual?" And there's a picture. Berry personally responded to Fox News on Twitter with a big FU. Berry and American fencer Ray Imboden were each given a 12-month probation in 2019 by the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Committee for protesting against social injustice in the U.S. at the Pan American Games in Lima, Peru that year. Berry raised her fist during the medal ceremony after winning there. The USOPC last year publicly and privately apologized to Berry, and officials changed the rule to allow protests at domestic events. Donald Trump has slammed American athletes who take a knee during the anthem to protest racial injustice. He won't be able to attack Berry from a White House platform now. In other Olympic trial news, Gabby Thomas became the second fastest woman ever at the 200-meter race, winning the final in 21.61 seconds. Grant Holloway won the 110-meter hurdles. His 12.81 time in the semifinals was only 1/100th of a second off the world record. And then of course there's this from my good friends over at Twitchy.com, who basically just had a field day with Gwen Berry. Olympian Gwen Berry says she's PO'd and it was disrespectful to play the national anthem while she was on the medal stand. Hammer thrower Gwen Berry, after qualifying for the Summer Olympics in Tokyo, turned away from the U.S. flag to protest the playing of the national anthem while she was on the medal stand. AP Sports tweeted out, "Hammer thrower Gwen Berry turned away from the flag during the national anthem on the podium at the U.S. Olympic trials. She then draped her black t-shirt with the words activist athlete emblazoned on the front over her head." Now the anthem, which at this qualifying event was only played once during each day of the competition, just happened to occur when she was while she was getting her bronze medal. This, she said, was a setup. SportsCenter tweeted out, "As the national anthem played while Gwen Berry was on the podium after qualifying for the Olympics, she turned away from the flag and draped a shirt with the words activist athlete over her head. She felt the timing of the anthem was a setup. Stop playing with me," she later tweeted. Berry also held up a t-shirt with activist athlete on the front during the ceremony. The Athletic tweeted out, "Hammer thrower Gwen Berry turned away from the American flag during the playing of the U.S. national anthem at the U.S. Olympic trials." Berry, a vocal activist, said she felt like the timing of the anthem Saturday was a setup. She's never been a fan for the song. Gary Young tweeted out, "The anthem doesn't speak for me, it never has. Gotta love Admiral's Berry throws." And Hamish Neal tweeted out, "My purpose and my mission is bigger than sports. I'm here to represent those who die due to systemic racism. That's the important part. That's why I'm going. That's why I'm here today." That in a tweet from Gwen Berry. Berry told reporters after the event that she was PO'd, that they played it red when she was getting her medal. The New York Post tweeting out, "Olympic hammer thrower Gwen Berry PO'd, national anthem was playing. It was disrespectful. I know they did it on purpose," she told journals. Washington Post Sports tweeted out, "I feel like it was a setup," Berry said with a burst of laughter. "It was real disrespectful. I know they did it on purpose, but it'll be alright. I see what's up." And her evidence for this conspiracy theory? The anthem has been scheduled to play at around 5:20 p.m. every evening at trials. On Saturday, the music started at 5:25 p.m. while the hammer throwers were on the podium. Gwen Gwen Berry tweeted out, the anthem has been scheduled to play at around 5:20 every evening at trials. On Saturday, the music started at 5:25 while the hammer throwers were on the podium. Like I said, set up. 5 minutes is longer than you think. Oh, blank ass, it wasn't a setup. Gwen Berry tweeted out, don't set me up and think I won't jump. In reply to Nick Zakari saying, Gwen Berry during the award ceremony for the hammer throw at Olympic trials where she competed, where she qualified for the Tokyo Games. And there's the picture there, and there's more on this. I'll get into more about this tomorrow, but yeah, I mean, it's just a shame that everything is becoming so politicized, but like I said, I'll get into this more in the next video. Leave a comment down below what you think about all this. You know, do you agree with Gwen Berry? Do you disagree with her? You know, what do you think what do you think should happen to her? Leave a comment down below. I'll have the articles that I've read packed in the show notes below, and I'll see you in the next video. Yesterday I spoke on Gwen Berry and what she did at the Olympic trials in Eugene when she turned her back on the American flag. There's been a little bit of more on this coming from thehill.com, which says Gwen Berry battles Dan Crenshaw over flag fight. Y'all are obsessed with me. U.S. Olympic hammer thrower Gwen Berry spread with Representative Dan Crenshaw, Republican of Texas, after he criticized her for turning away from the American flag during the national anthem at the U.S. track and field trials. Berry tweeted, "At this point, y'all are obsessed with me," in response to Crenshaw responding to a video from the lawmaker's appearance on Fox News. You can see the tweet there. Berry turned away from the American flag and toward the stands when the national anthem began playing on Saturday and placed a t-shirt with the words "Activist Athlete" over her head. She said it felt like it was a setup and they did it on purpose because she was previously told the anthem would be played before the athletes walked out, according to ESPN. A USA track and field spokeswoman, however, said the timing was already scheduled for 5:20 p.m. local time in Eugene, Oregon. Berry previously said that she would use her position at the Tokyo Olympics to keep awareness focused on social injustice in the U.S. The move sparked criticism among Republicans, including Crenshaw, who called for Berry to be removed from the U.S. Olympic team and said, "We don't need any more activist athletes. We don't need any more activist athletes. She should be removed from the team," Crenshaw said during an interview on Fox and Friends. There's the tweet there. He then likened Berry's actions at the field trials to NBA players demonstrating during the national anthem before games. The entire point of the Olympic system, or the Olympic team, is to represent the United States of America. That's the entire point. Okay, so, you know, it's one thing when these NBA players do it. Okay, fine, we'll just stop watching. But now the Olympic team, and there's multiple cases of this, Crenshaw said. They should be removed. That should be the bare minimum requirement is that you believe in the country representing, he added. Berry tweeted back at Crenshaw and the other backlash she received, writing on Twitter, "At this point, y'all are obsessed with me." She also directly took on Crenshaw, retweeting a tweet that said, "Dan can kiss my butt." This from Ms. Mox, hot black bitter, Dan can kiss my butt. And if folks gonna be mad at black American athletes, when y'all gonna cheer for the USA? Because we're everywhere in these Olympics. Ms. Berry throws is that deal, and y'all should put some respect on her name, period. Berry first raised a fist when she was on the podium during the Pan American Games in Peru, according to the Washington Post. She was placed on probation by the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Committee, but the group later apologized to Berry. In March, the committee said it would allow some forms of demonstrations during the qualifying trials, including kneeling during the anthem and raising fists. Athletes will also be allowed to peacefully and respectfully engage in demonstrations in support of racial or social causes at the Games. And there's this from Fox News on that. Gwen Berry, flag-snubbing U.S. track and field star, defended by the White House. So yes, even President Biden's involved in this. Psaki says Biden believes pride in our country means recognizing that we haven't lived up to our highest ideals. White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki Monday defended U.S. track and field star Gwen Berry's decision to turn her back on the nation's flag, saying Berry was seeking to peacefully protest the moments that Americans haven't lived up to our highest ideals. Berry, 31, placed third over the weekend in the hammer throw during the U.S. Olympic trials, earning her a spot on the team. As the national anthem was played, she turned from the flag. This weekend, Gwen Berry, who hopes to represent the United States as an Olympian on the hammer throwing events, won a bronze medal at the trials, and then she turned her back on the flag while the anthem played. Fox News' Peter Doocy said to Psaki during the daily White House briefing, "Does President Biden think that is appropriate behavior for someone who hopes to represent Team USA?" Well, Peter, I haven't spoken to the president specifically about this, but I know he's incredibly proud to be an American and has great respect for the anthem and all that it represents, especially for our men and women serving in uniform all over the world, Psaki said. He would also say, of course, that part of that pride in our country means recognizing that there are moments where we are, as a country, haven't lived up to our highest ideals, and it means respecting the right of people, granting them in the Constitution to peacefully protest. Berry has a history of taking controversial stances, raising a fist during the medal ceremony at the Pan American Games in 2019. "The anthem doesn't speak for me, it never has," said Berry. "My purpose and my mission is bigger than sports," Berry said. Now, it remains to be seen, at least on my end, just what she means by that statement, but it's definitely worth keeping eyes on, and found out that she's from the Southern Illinois area, Southern Illinois area. As a matter of fact, I think somebody said she went to Southern Illinois University, so there might be many people upset in her neck of the woods on that. But there are many people who say that she should be removed from the team. As a matter of fact, there's this article from Russia Today that says, "Don't send her to the Olympics. Fury after U.S. hammer thrower turns back on flag as anthem plays during medal ceremony." This from Sunday. Hammer thrower Gwen Berry claims she was a victim of a setup after turning away from the Stars and Stripes as the national anthem played while she collected her bronze medal at the U.S. Olympic track and field trials. Berry booked a spot at this year's Tokyo Olympics by finishing third behind Deanna Price and Brooke Anderson on Saturday in Eugene, Oregon, sending the 31-year-old to her second successive games, but that achievement was overshadowed by what happened on the podium after the competition. As the three athletes were collecting their medals, a Star-Spangled Banner struck up, prompting Berry to turn away from the U.S. flag and eventually cover her head with a black t-shirt emblazoned with the words "Activist Athlete" on the front. Tweet from Nick Zaccardi says Gwen Berry during the award ceremony for the hammer thrower at Olympic trials where she qualified for the Tokyo Games via the AP. Now, the U.S. anthem is played once every evening at the trials as opposed to during each medal ceremony. And Berry, who is a local social activist, claimed there was no coincidence that it had started while she was on the podium. "I feel it was a setup and they did it on purpose," Berry said. "I was PO'd, to be honest." However, organizers denied any purposeful timing, asserting that the anthem was played at a pre-scheduled time. "The national anthem was scheduled to play at 5:20 p.m. today," said USA track and field spokeswoman Susan Hazard. "We did not wait until the athletes were on the podium for the hammer thrower awards. The national anthem is played every day according to a previously published schedule." According to ESPN, the music had started at 5:25 p.m. on Saturday, and Berry remained convinced that she was being deliberately triggered. They said they were going to play it before we walked out, and they played it when we were out there, said the Hammer Star. But I don't really want to talk about the anthem because that's not important. The anthem doesn't speak for me, it never does. Social justice warrior Berry has come under scrutiny for her podium actions in the past, raising a fist during the presentation ceremony after winning the Pan Am Games back in 2019. Now, she was sanctioned for the gesture, but the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Committee was later pushed to promise that it won't punish athletes for any peaceful protests in Tokyo this summer, despite the International Olympic Committee, or IOC, saying actions such as taking a knee will be banned. Berry's latest display of defiance drew a mixed reaction online, with some hailing her as a legend. Good on her. Wish more people would understand that an anthem is symbolic, just like the flag. There are no requirements for you to participate in the reverence, wrote one fan on social media. But there was also a considerable backlash and calls for Berry not to be sent to represent her nation this summer if she has such obvious issues with honoring its symbol. April Marie tweeted out, "What the crap is this? You don't have respect for our anthem and our flag? Fine, but you shouldn't represent our nation. If she doesn't want to represent us, don't send her," was another blunt assessment. Sharing the story and the image of Berry turning her back, right-wing and commenter Dinesh D'Souza wrote, "We're going to see more of this. It's going to make patriotic Americans cheer for foreign competitors and against the anti-American Americans." Angry observers should brace for similar scenes at this summer's games in Japan, considering the increasing proclivity for athletes to display their social virtues as well as sporting prowess. That includes Berry, who proclaimed that her mission is bigger than sports. "I'm here to represent those who died due to systemic racism. That's the important part. That's why I'm going. That's why I'm here today," said the hammer thrower. And you can see a picture of her raising her fist during the Pan Am Games. But yeah, I mean, it's just interesting. And as Brandon Morris said over at Red State, and it's a VIP, but there is another thing about that. But yeah, I mean, you know, so things are rather tough. It remains to be seen just what'll happen, but I'll have more comments on it in the comment section below. Leave your thoughts as to what you think about all this. Do you agree with her? Do you disagree with her? Do you think that she should not be a part of the Olympic team? Leave a comment down below. I'll have the articles that I've read today listed in the show notes, and I'll see you in the next video. Tucker Carlson has been a journalist for about 20 years or so. He was part of Crossfire over on CNN with Paul Begala. Rush Limbaugh called him Chadsworth Osborne Jr. because of the way that Tucker had worn a lot of bow ties. He moved to Fox News in the late 20-teens and is a host of Tucker Carlson Tonight, which comes on right before Sean Hannity. And he's gotten himself into a little bit of a controversial turmoil. This coming from Spectator.org, the American Spectator. Tucker Carlson says the NSA is spying on him. The leading conservative commentator may be in the crosshairs of the surveillance state. Conservative commentator Tucker Carlson, host of Fox News' Tucker Carlson Tonight, made a stunning accusation on Monday evening. The Biden administration is spying on us. Carlson told his audience of more than 3 million viewers that he had been contacted by a whistleblower within the U.S. government who warned that the National Security Agency, or NSA, was monitoring the electronic communications between him and his staff. Carlson said he believes that the leading surveillance agency is planning to leak this information in an attempt to take the show off the air, but he did not provide evidence to back up his claim. Carlson then vouched for the legitimacy of his source, claiming that the whistleblower was able to repeat back information about an upcoming Tucker Carlson Tonight story that could have only come directly from my texts and emails. There is no other possible source for that information, period. If Carlson's allegation is true, it would constitute one of the most damning revelations about the U.S. surveillance state and the Biden administration's usage of it to date. One that spying on Americans is plainly illegal, though the NSA appears to have made little effort to change its approach despite years of political and media scrutiny since the 2013 Snowden leaks. Furthermore, as Tucker Carlson pointed out during his Monday evening segment, there would be additional ethical concerns about a ruling government spying on opposition journalists and attempting to deplatform them. Now, there is little doubt that Carlson has made himself deeply unpopular in the U.S. intelligence circuit. He has been one of the main journalistic voices on either side of the political spectrum, pushing back against what he has described as abuses of power by the deep state. Most recently, he suggested that the FBI may have played a role in fomenting the January 6th riot at the Capitol. Breaking with much of the riot, Carlson has also picked fights with the rest of the permanent Washington apparatus, in particular the leadership of the Pentagon. On Thursday last week, he caused consternation among liberal commentators after calling General Mark Milley, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, a pig and stupid for endorsing critical race theory, reading materials in the military. Carlson closed his Monday segment by stating that his team has filed a Freedom of Information Act request for what the NSA has gathered about his show. America's leading surveillance state organ is, of course, unlikely to hand over anything useful, and indeed, Carlson noted that the request was filed mostly as a formality. He continued, only Congress can force transparency on the intelligence agencies, and they should do that immediately. Indeed, but let us not forget that the same kind of people who run the NSA are now in control of Congress. And that is so very true. There is also this from the Huffington Post by Ron Dicker. Tucker Carlson claims NSA is spying on him to cancel his Fox News show. Tucker Carlson alleged Monday that the National Security Agency is spying on him to get his primetime Fox News show canceled. There's a clip below. Yesterday we heard from a whistleblower within the U.S. government who reached out to warn us that the NSA is monitoring our electronic communications and is planning to leak them in an attempt to take the show off the air, he said. Carlson, a Fox News star who has pushed revisionist takes on the Capitol insurrection, stoked fears over teaching students about racism and rants anti-vaccine conspiracy theories, said he had proof of government spying from his source who knew about a story that the show is working on that could only have come from Carlson's texts and emails. The Biden administration is spying on us, Carlson declared. We have confirmed that. Spying on opposition journalists is incompatible with democracy, he added. This is scary and we need to stop it right away. Bradley P. Moss, a lawyer specializing in national security, expressed skepticism about Carlson's pronouncement, but allowed that maybe his comments were picked up. Tucker is making serious accusations with no proof and is basing corroboration on a story he allegedly is working on that none of us know about. Maybe his comms were picked up. We know DOJ collected comms of journals during Trump and Obama presidencies. That in a tweet from Brad Moss yesterday. Famed whistleblower Edward Snowden revealed that the NSA's mass surveillance of ordinary Americans in 2013. The Justice Department under the Trump administration secretly seized communications records for reporters at the Washington Post, CNN, and the New York Times. The Daily Beast suggested that Carlson was perhaps looking to get ahead of a potentially negative story about himself. And there is a clip. Carlson's spying claims began at the 1920 mark. It's unavailable, but yeah, so this is definitely interesting and something to definitely keep eyes on, especially in the wake of other Fox News journalists being, I wouldn't say pressured, but being watched on by the Obama administration back in 2013. I think David Rosen, formerly of Fox News, was a part of that. And yeah, so this is definitely something to keep an eye on. And as Matt Respa points out, at Town Hall. There's something odd about this. And he wrote a piece this morning. There's something odd about the NSA's response to Tucker Carlson's spying allegations. He dropped the allegation last night. Fox News' Tucker Carlson said a whistleblower came forward to allege that he and some of his staff are being spied on by the National Security Agency. They're monitoring their communications to find anything to remove his show from the air, but there is no solid evidence to back this up, but there is history. The FBI did spy on the Trump campaign in 2016. The FBI did falsify documents to obtain spy warrants on Americans. There have been unmasking of Trump officials on NSA intelligence reports. They've done this before, and now it seems that they've restarted their dirty tricks campaign. What's worse is that no one is really denying it. There is a clip in a Daily Caller tweet. Tucker Carlson says a whistleblower told him he is being spied on by the NSA and that he filed a FOIA request for information. The Biden administration is spying on us. We have confirmed that. Now, the Biden White House could give a straight answer, and now we have this response from the NSA, which really doesn't deny it either. Technofog zeroed in on where things are fishy. NSA CSS tweeted out a statement from the NSA regarding recent allegations. On June 28, 2021, Tucker Carlson alleged that the National Security Agency has been monitoring our electronic communications and is planning to leak them in an attempt to take the show off the air. This allegation is untrue. Tucker Carlson has never been an intelligence target of the agency, and the NSA has never had any plans to try and take his program off the air. NSA is a foreign intelligence mission. We target foreign powers to generate insights on foreign activities that could harm the United States, with limited exceptions, for example, an emergency. NSA may not target a U.S. citizen without a court order that explicitly authorizes the targeting. Katie Pavlich in a reply tweeted out, "No replies? That's not weird at all." Daily Caller tweeted out in response to the same tweet from the NSA that they turned off the replies. Now, this is a carefully drafted denial by the NSA, likely coordinated by NSA leadership, as there are 3 separate allegations within Tucker's quote. To this, we ask a key question. Which allegation is untrue? Is it that the NSA has been monitoring Tucker's electronic communications? Is it that the NSA is planning to leak Tucker's communications? Or is it that the NSA will try to take Tucker's show off the air? Here is the NSA. Here the NSA is using vague language to mislead the public. The press will run this as a wholesale denial, and many in America will agree. Those who look closely will see something else. That the NSA, while stating that Tucker has never been an intelligence target, does not categorically deny having his electronic communications. Something is up. We know that the intelligence community is woke. They turn on Trump. They leaked information to hamstring his administration via the Russian collusion hoax. They've done this before, folks. Sorry, I simply cannot believe a simple thing that comes from these people's mouths. And neither can I, but, I mean, it is a government, and as I had said a couple of times, to steal a phrase from Norm Peterson of Cheers, which was played by George Wendt, politics and Washington is a dog-eat-dog world, and we are wearing milk-bone underwear. But yeah, so things are definitely strange and odd, and there's this little beauty from the Daily Beast on this as well. It says Tucker claims the NSA is spying on him to take down his show. This is scary. They did this for political reasons. The Biden administration is spying on us. We have confirmed that, Carlson bluntly said on Monday night. Fox News host Tucker Carlson dropped a bombshell claim on Monday night against the U.S. government, declaring that a whistleblower had informed him that the National Security Agency was actively spying on his communications in an effort to take his show off the air. In recent weeks, Carlson has spun a largely baseless conspiracy that the FBI was to blame for the January 6th Capitol insurrection, inciting a far-right website to make the assertion that the presence of unindicted co-conspirators in the ensuing indictments means FBI agents were actively involved with organizing the seditious Capitol riots, and besides, Carlson fundamentally misunderstanding the role of cooperating witnesses after the fact. Legal experts have pointed out that government agents cannot be named as unindicted co-conspirators. During Monday's broadcast of his primetime Fox show, Carlson once again defended his claims about the FBI, though this time he noticeably softened the language of his prior assertion that the insurrection was a government false flag. The war on terror, now ongoing for 20 years, has pivoted. It is now being waged against American citizens, opponents of the regime, the right-wing host said. We saw this on display on January 6th. We told you a couple of weeks ago, based on the language in publicly available indictments, that the FBI had foreknowledge of the riots of the Capitol that day, and the agents that we spoke to confirmed that that is true. The FBI had sources in that crowd, confidential sources, snitches, that's 100% certain. After claiming the FBI had merely had prior knowledge of the rioters' intentions because it had sources in the crowd, Carlson suddenly made a stunning accusation. The federal government itself was snooping on him, and for the sole purpose of ending his show. But it's not just political protests that the government is spying on, Carlson exclaimed. Yesterday we heard from a whistleblower within the U.S. government who reached out to warn us that the NSA, the National Security Agency, is monitoring our electronic communications and is planning to leak them in an attempt to take the show off the air. Insisting he would normally be skeptical of a shocking claim as it is a crime and the U.S. isn't a third world country, the Fox star nonetheless said he knew for a fact that the NSA absolutely did spy on him. The whistleblower, who is in a position to know, repeated back to us information about a story that we are working on that could only have come from my texts and emails, he said. There is no other possible source for that information, period. They did it for political reasons. The Biden administration is spying on us, and we have confirmed that. Carlson claimed that he had filed a Freedom of Information Act request demanding all information that the NSA and other government agencies have gathered on him and his show. He then appeared to call on Congress and act on his behalf. Only Congress can force transparency on the intelligence agencies, and they should do that immediately, he concluded. Spying on opposition journalists is incompatible with democracy. They're doing it to us, and again, they're definitely doing it to us. They're almost certainly doing it to others. This is scary, and we need to stop it right away. Now, it remains to be seen if any proof will come out that the Biden administration is using spy agencies to take down Tucker Carlson tonight, or if the Fox News star is looking to get ahead of a potentially negative story, as we've seen him do in the past. And that's that, but yeah, I mean, we've seen this many times. Both Republicans and conservatives or both Republicans and Democrats had done it in the past, so there's a lot of shaky stuff going on. I'm going to keep a lookout on it. As a matter of fact, I have a couple of more articles which I will bring to you tomorrow on this, but in the comment down below, tell me what you think about this. Do you think that the NSA is spying on Tucker Carlson to shut his show down? Do you think that the NSA is spying on other journalists and or regular civilians? What do you think is happening out there? Leave a comment down below. I'll leave the links to the articles in the show notes below, and I'll see you in the next video. Yesterday, Bill Cosby had his sex assault conviction overturned, and he is freed from prison. Got this from the Associated Press, as well as other sites. From the AP first, Bill Cosby free from prison, his sex conviction overturned by Mary Claire Dale. Pennsylvania's highest court threw out Bill Cosby's sexual assault conviction and released him from prison Wednesday in a stunning reversal of fortune for the comedian most known as America's Dad. Ruling that the prosecutor who brought the case was bound by his predecessor's agreement not to charge Cosby. Cosby, 83, flashed the V for Victory sign to a helicopter overhead as he trudged into his suburban Philadelphia home after serving nearly 3 years of a 3 to 10 year sentence for drugging and violating Temple University sports administrator Andrea Constand in 2004. The former Cosby Show star, the first celebrity tried and convicted in the #MeToo era, had no comment as he arrived and just smiled and nodded later at a news conference table, where his lawyer, Jennifer Bonjean, said, "We are thrilled to have Mr. Cosby home. He served 3 years of an unjust sentence, and he did it with dignity and purpose," she added. In a statement, Constanta and her lawyers called the ruling disappointing, and they, like many other advocates, expressed fear that it could discharge sexual assault victims from coming forward. "We urge all victims to have their voices heard," they added. Cosby was arrested in 2015 when a district attorney, armed with newly unsealed evidence, the comic's damaging deposition in a lawsuit brought on by Constand, filed charges against him just days before the 20 or 12-year statute of limitations was about to run out. But the Pennsylvania Supreme Court said Wednesday that District Attorney Kevin Steele, who made the decision to arrest Cosby, was obligated to stand by his predecessor's promise not to charge Cosby, though there was no evidence that agreement was ever put in writing. Justice David Wecht, writing for a split court, said Cosby had relied on the previous district attorney's decision not to charge him when the comedian gave his potentially incriminating testimony in Constand's civil case. The court called Cosby's subsequent arrest an affront to fundamental fairness, particularly when it results in a criminal prosecution that was foregone for more than a decade. It said justice and fair play and decency require that the district attorney's office stand by the decision of the previous DA. Now, the justices said that overturning the conviction and barring any further prosecution is the only remedy that comports with society's reasonable expectations of its elected prosecutors and our criminal justice system. Cosby was promptly set free from the state prison in suburban Montgomery County and driven home. "What we saw today was justice for all Americans," said a Cosby spokesperson, Andrew Wyatt. "Mr. Cosby's conviction being overturned is for the world and for all Americans who were being treated unfairly by the judicial system and some bad officers." Bonjean said Cosby was extremely happy to be home and looks forward to reuniting with his wife and children. Several supporters outside yelled, "Hey, hey, hey!" the catchphrase of Cosby's animated Fat Albert character, which brought a smile from him. He later tweeted an old photo of himself with his fist raised and eyes closed with the caption, "I have never changed my stance nor my story. I have always maintained my innocence. Thank you to all my fans, supporters, and friends who stood by me through this ordeal. Special thanks to the Pennsylvania Supreme Court for upholding the rules of law." In a statement, Steele, the district attorney, said Cosby went free on a procedural issue that is irrelevant to the facts of the crime. He commended Constant for coming forward and added, "My hope is that this decision will not dampen the reporting of sexual assaults by victims." "I'm furious to hear this news," wrote actor Amber Tamlin, founder of Time's Up, an advocacy group for sex crimes victims, said on Twitter, "I personally know women who this man drugged and raped while unconscious. Shame on the court and this decision." But Cosby Show co-star Phylicia Rashad tweeted, "Finally, a terrible wrong is being righted and a miscarriage of justice is corrected." 4 Supreme Court justices formed the majority of the ruling in Cosby's favor, while 3 others dissented in whole or in part. Peter Goldberger, a suburban Pennsylvania lawyer with an expertise in criminal appeals, said prosecutors could ask the Pennsylvania Supreme Court for re-argument or reconsideration, but it could be a very long shot. "I can't imagine that with such a lengthy opinion, with a thoughtful concurring opinion and a thoughtful dissenting opinion, that you could honestly say that they made a simple mistake that would change their minds if they pointed out to them," Goldberger said. And even though Cosby was charged only with the assault on Constand, The judge at his trial allowed 5 other accusers to testify that they too were similarly victimized by Cosby in the 1980s. Prosecutors called them as witnesses to establish what they said was a pattern of behavior on Cosby's part. Cosby's lawyers had argued on appeal that the use of the 5 additional accusers was improper, but the Pennsylvania High Court did not weigh in on the question, saying it was moot given the finding that Cosby should not have been prosecuted in the first place. In sentencing Cosby, the trial judge had declared him a sexually violent predator who could not be safely allowed out in public and needed to report to authorities for the rest of his life. In May, Cosby was denied parole after refusing to participate in sex offender programs behind bars. He said he would resist the treatment programs and refuse to acknowledge wrongdoing even if it meant serving the full 10 years. The groundbreaking black actor who grew up in public housing in Philadelphia made a fortune estimated at $400 million during his 50 years in the entertainment industry. That included the TV shows I Spy, The Cosby Show, and Fat Albert, along with comedy albums and a multitude of television commercials. The suburban Philadelphia prosecutor who originally looked into Constand's allegations, Montgomery County District Attorney Bruce Castor, considered the case flawed because Constand waited a year to come forward and stayed in contact with Cosby afterward. Castor declined to prosecute and instead encouraged Constand to sue for damages. Questioned under oath as part of the lawsuit, Cosby said he used to offer quaaludes to women who he wanted to have sex with. He eventually settled with Constand for $3.4 million. Portions of the deposition became public at the request of the Associated Press and spelled Cosby's downfall, opening the floodgates on accusations from other women and destroying the comic's good guy reputation and career. More than 60 women came forward to say Cosby violated them. The AP does not typically identify sexual assault victims without the permission which Constand has granted. Cosby in the deposition acknowledged giving quaaludes to a 19-year-old woman before having sex with her at a Las Vegas hotel in 1976. Cosby called the encounter consensual. On Wednesday, the woman, Therese Seringis, now 64, said the court ruling takes my breath away. I think it's a miscarriage of justice. This is about procedure. It's not about the truth of the woman, she said. She also said she took solace in the fact that Cosby served only nearly 3 years behind bars. That's as good as it gets in America for sex crime victims. And there's this from BuzzFeed News. This is why Cosby's rape conviction was overturned. Bill Cosby walked out of prison on Wednesday afternoon, 2 years into what was supposed to be a sentence of 3 to 10 years after he was found guilty of raping Andrea Constand at his home in 2004. Hours earlier, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court had tossed out the conviction. What happened? A majority of the state justices concluded that Cosby's constitutional rights had been violated when local prosecutors in Montgomery County, Pennsylvania, charged him in 2015. The problem with that criminal case, the court found, was that a previous district attorney had announced a decade earlier that Cosby would not face prosecution. That announcement triggered a series of events that included Cosby providing incriminating information against himself in a civil lawsuit, which eventually became part of the criminal prosecution he was under the impression would never happen. It's an extraordinary situation that, as the court noted in Wednesday's decision, was without precedent. The problem wasn't just that then Montgomery County District Attorney Bruce Castor had made an unusual public commitment outside the normal process for an immunity agreement. It also wasn't just that a later district attorney went back on Castor's public pledge. The court found that Cosby's decision to rely on Castor's statement and incriminate himself in the civil case, and to then have those statements used against him, ran so far afoul of his due process rights that the only way to fix it was to throw out the entire prosecution. We do not dispute that this remedy is both severe and rare, but it is warranted here, indeed compelled. Justice David Weck wrote for the majority, society holds a strong interest in the prosecution of crimes. It is also true that no such interest, however important, can ever eclipse society's interest in ensuring that the constitutional rights of the people were vindicated. The wheels have been set in motion in 2005 when Castor first learned about Constand's allegations against Cosby. That a year earlier, the actor had given her pills that caused her to become incapacitated and then sexually assaulted her. But Castro ultimately wasn't convinced that his office could prove the case in court, given that Constand waited a year to file her complaint with law enforcement. There also was no forensic evidence, and Castro believed Constand's recollections would be less precise. Castro told Cosby's team, and importantly stated in a February 2005 press release, that he would not bring criminal charges related to Constand's allegation. Castro, who more recently defended former President Donald Trump in his February impeachment trial, later testified that his intent was to try to still up Constand and get justice by taking a criminal prosecution off the table. Castro believed that would prevent Cosby from invoking his Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination in Constand's civil lawsuit. Now fast forward a decade. In 2015, when dozens of women began making similar accusations against Cosby, documents in Constand's civil case were unsealed in response to a media request. Then District Attorney Rita Riteri-Furman then reopened the criminal investigation that her predecessor had closed. Castro wrote to Furman, warning her about his public promise to Cosby, but she chose to press on. Her successor, Kevin Steele, formally charged Cosby in December 2015 with 3 counts of aggravated assault. A jury eventually found Cosby guilty in April 2018. He was sentenced several months later, and in addition to the prison term, he was required to register as a sexual predator. Castro would later say that he had intended to block local prosecutors from bringing criminal charges against Cosby related to Constand's allegations at any point in the future, but he did not get Constand's consent to make this decision or even communicate his promise to Constand or her lawyers. She learned about it from a reporter. He also didn't negotiate a formal immunity statement with Cosby and presented it to a judge to get an official order that would be legally binding on the district attorney's office going forward. Instead, as the Pennsylvania Supreme Court described it, Castro's statement was a unilateral exercise of prosecutorial discretion. Lower courts that considered Cosby's case found this sequence of events cut against Cosby's argument that it was reasonable for him to rely on Castro's statement when he decided to testify against his own interests. Cosby ended up sitting for 4 depositions in Constand's civil lawsuit, during which he confessed to several incriminating acts, including providing quaaludes to the women he wanted to have sex with, though he insisted he just gave Constand Benadryl. Eventually, Constand settled the suit for $3.38 million, but the state Supreme Court had a different interpretation of the legal heft of Castro's announcement, even if there hadn't been a formal immunity agreement. We hold that when a prosecutor makes a conditional guarantee or promise of non-prosecution, and when the defendant relies upon that guarantee to the detriment of his constitutional right not to testify, the principle of fundamental fairness that undergirds due process of law in our criminal justice system demands that the promise be enforced, Wecht wrote. 2 former prosecutors who reviewed the court's decision told BuzzFeed News that it was very common for prosecutors to tell defense attorneys that they don't plan to pursue charges, but normally they said, officials don't put out press releases about it. I've been a prosecutor for more than 40 years, and certainly I would periodically tell or even write to a defense lawyer saying we would decline to prosecute right now. Michael Levy, the former assistant U.S. attorney in the Eastern District of Pennsylvania and a current law professor at the University of Pennsylvania, said, I would have never thought of that as meaning no matter what happened, we would never go ahead with the criminal case. What makes it slightly unusual is the public nature of this, Shan Wu, a former federal prosecutor, said. Then there's a reliance by Cosby on that to say, okay, well, if I'm not facing any danger, I can testify in a civil case. But Wu also questioned the decision by Cosby's lawyers to let him testify at all, notwithstanding Castro's press release. Anytime you have a person who has been charged or accused formally, it's very, very risky to let them say anything ever, he said. If I were Cosby's attorney back then, I would have fought tooth and nail against him being deposed. The state Supreme Court said in their opinion that, despite the deposition testimony being a bad idea, it was reasonable for Cosby to rely on the advice of his lawyers and the then district attorney. We cannot deem it unreasonable to rely upon the advice of one's attorneys, Wecht wrote. A criminal defendant confronts a number of important decisions that may result in severe consequences to the defendant if and when they are made without a full understanding of the intricacies and nuances of the ever-changing criminal law. The court's decision was not unanimous. Justice Thomas Saylor wrote that he did not agree with the majority that Castro's press release was an unconditional promise. He said he believed that the release was a conventional public announcement by someone in a temporary elected position that would in no way be binding upon his own future decision-making processes, let alone those of his process or of his successor. Justice Kevin Doherty, joined by Chief Justice Max Baer, wrote separately to say he agreed with the majority that due process does not permit the government to exchange in this type of coercive bait and switch, but he disagreed with tossing out the case entirely, writing that the appropriate outcome was a new trial where any evidence from Cosby's depositions was suppressed. Hours after the decision was released, Steele, Montgomery County's current district attorney, said in a statement that it should not deter victims of sexual assault from seeking justice. Cosby now goes free on a procedural issue that is irrelevant to the facts of the crime, Steele wrote. Prosecutors in my office will continue to follow the evidence whenever and to whomever it leads. We still believe that no one is above the law, including those who are rich, famous, and powerful. But in a statement to BuzzFeed News, Jennifer Von Jean, Cosby's current attorney, said that at the end of the day, there has to be a fair process. Prosecutors have to live up to their word. We cannot change decades in history of our treatment of women on the shoulders of one man or two men, which is what seems to be happening, she said. There is a lot of work that needs to be done, and we can't undo the past simply by cheating and breaking the rules and disregarding our cherished constitutional principles just because it makes us feel good. And that's so true. I mean, okay, I admit I did not follow the trial in its entirety, but based on what had been seen and heard from these attorneys, I think that it may just be a good thing. Fox News also has a take on it from a legal perspective. This coming from FoxNews.com by Jessica Napoli. How did Bill Cosby's conviction overturn happen? Legal experts weigh in. Bill Cosby's sex assault conviction was overturned by the Pennsylvania Supreme Court on Wednesday. The actor, 83, was released from prison after a court ruled that the prosecutor who brought the case was bound by his predecessor's agreement not to charge Cosby. Philip Dubé, a Los Angeles County deputy public defender who was not involved in the case, told Fox News that the comedian, once dubbed America's Dad, was released because he was denied due process and the benefit of an immunity agreement reached between him and prosecutors during civil litigation filed by his victims. In exchange for testifying at civil depositions, the elected DA in office at the time granted Cosby immunity from prosecution. That agreement lives beyond the term in office of the elected DA at the time, he explained. In 2018, Cosby was convicted of drugging and sexually assaulting Andrea Constand, a Temple University employee at a suburban Pennsylvania state back in 2004. The disgraced Cosby show star has served more than 2 years of a 3 to 10 year sentence at a state prison near Pennsylvania or near Philadelphia. Niyama Ramani, president of West Coast Trial Lawyers, who is also not involved in Cosby's case, told Fox News that this overturn is unprecedented. There is a district attorney in Pennsylvania who declined to prosecute Cosby, he said, referencing Bruce Castor, who was a Montgomery district attorney at the time. Castor made a very public statement saying, "We're not going to prosecute Bill Cosby because of insufficient evidence." Relying on that statement, Cosby, and in a subsequent civil case, not a criminal case, was unable to invoke his Fifth Amendment privilege against self-incrimination. During the depositions, Cosby gives very incriminating and damaging statements. Then there's a new DA, and that person decides to prosecute the case, Ramani said in reference. After the new DA takes over and during the prosecution, the DA uses those very damaging statements that Cosby made during his civil deposition. So what the Pennsylvania Supreme Court essentially said was, look, you can't do this. Even though there was no formal immunity, Cosby reasonably relied on that statement, declining prosecution when he gave his deposition in the civil case, which is why he was so open. The Pennsylvania Supreme Court said that District Attorney Kevin Steele, who made the decision to arrest Cosby, was obligated to stand by his predecessor's promise not to charge Cosby. Cosby was charged in 2018 based on evidence that would be inadmissible, Ramani said. He testified truthfully, but he did so under the assumption that there would be no prosecution. The court called Cosby's arrest an affront to fundamental fairness, particularly when it results in a criminal prosecution that was foregone for more than a decade. The justices said that overturning the conviction and barring any further prosecution is the only remedy that comports with society's reasonable expectations of its elected prosecutors and our criminal justice system. And that's that. But yeah, so that's interesting in of itself. And now earlier we had seen from an actress that Cosby should still be in jail. There is this coming from USA Today, and it says Phylicia Rashad says a terrible wrong was being right after Bill Cosby's conviction overturned. Other celebs agree. This by Marina Petovsky. The former Cosby show star Phylicia Rashad celebrates after Bill Cosby's conviction is overturned. A miscarriage of justice is corrected, the actress wrote on social media Wednesday. While Rashad praised the news of Cosby's release, others took to social media to condemn the move. Cosby has served more than 2 years of a 3 to 10 year sentence at a state prison near Philadelphia. That's the story's highlights. Here's the story. Phylicia Rashad, who played Bill Cosby's wife Claire Huxtable on The Cosby Show, took to social media Wednesday to applaud Pennsylvania's Supreme Court decision to overturn Cosby's sex assault conviction. The court found that an agreement with the previous prosecutor meant Cosby could not be charged in the case. Prosecutors also said that it blocked the possibility of a third trial in the case. Rashad lauded the court's decision as a terrible wrong being righted. A miscarriage of justice is corrected, Rashad added on Twitter alongside a photo of Cosby, who has since been released from state prison. In a follow-up tweet, Rashad wrote, "I fully support survivors of sexual assault coming forward," adding that her post was in no way intended to be insensitive to their truth. "Personally, I know from friends and family that such abuse has lifelong residual effects," the actor added. "My heartfelt wishes for healing." Cosby, 83, was convicted in 2018 of drugging and molesting Andrea Constant, a Temple University employee. In 2004, at his suburban Philadelphia estate, Howard University, where Rashad was recently named Dean of Fine Arts, issued a statement in response to the actress's tweet saying the personal opinions of leadership do not reflect the university's. While Dean Rashad has acknowledged in her follow-up tweet that victims must be heard and believed, her initial tweet lacked sensitivity towards survivors of sexual assault. The statement read, "We will continue to advocate for survivors fully and support their right to be heard." Cosby was charged in late 2015 when a prosecutor armed with newly unsealed evidence, his damaging deposition from her lawsuit, arrested him days before the 12-year statute of limitations expired. Constance said in a joint statement with her attorneys Dolores M. Troiani and B.B. Kivitz that the decision was not only disappointing but of concern and that it may discourage those who seek justice for sexual assault in the criminal justice system from reporting or participating in the prosecution of the assailant, or may force a victim to choose between filing either a criminal or a civil action. Cosby has served more than 2 years of a 3 to 10 year sentence at a state prison near Pennsylvania, or should be near Philadelphia. He is vowed to serve all 10 years rather than acknowledge any remorse over the encounter with Constant. While Rashad praised the result of Cosby's release, other celebrities condemned the move. To every woman who was sexually assaulted by Bill Cosby, my heart longs for you today, and I am full fury. Actor Deborah Messing tweeted, "It's horrifying." Dylan Farrell, who accused her adoptive father Woody Allen of sexually molesting her when she was a child, labeled the news as a perfect example of how not just our society, but our justice system continually fails survivors of sexual assault. For those who question myself and other survivors about the reasons and timing of coming forward, I hope that today will serve a teachable moment on empathy and why it takes years, if ever, for someone to discuss their abuse, she wrote. Many survivors will look at the events of today and decide that it's not worth it, that even when justice is served, it can be taken away. Actor and activist Amber Tamblyn tweeted, "I don't want to hear anything about how cancel culture ruined men's lives during the Me Too era reckoning for women and survivors. How we went too far. Today, news that Cosby's conviction is being overturned is proof that we haven't gone far enough. Our justice system must change," she added. In a statement to the Associated Press, Anita Hill, chair of the Hollywood Commission, said that the ruling demonstrates how failures in our criminal justice systems make accountability for sexual assault impossible. Hill added, "Systems that are ensuring accountability for powerful abusers, protect workers, and prevent agreements that shield abusers are urgently needed in entertainment and other industries." Actor Josh Gad wrote on Twitter, "Victims of sexual assault deserve better than whatever the expletive just happened in Pennsylvania." Author Abraham X. Kendi said he believes the survivors. Ana Navarro Cardenas, political strategist and commentator, took to Twitter to thank the dozens of women who've come forward with allegations against Cosby. "Thank you to all those who had the courage to speak up and seek justice," she wrote. "It was not in vain. He served 2 years. We all know what he did. And they made it easier for other women to come forward." Actor Rosanna Arquette shared she knows so many women and men who were so afraid to press charges against their rapists and re-traumatize themselves on Twitter. "I am heartbroken today to hear the news of Cosby's release," she added. "This is sickening. My heart is with my sisters, their survivors. We have work to do. When will things get better for women and girls regarding sexual assault, sexism, misogyny, and ageism?" Kathy Griffin tweeted. "What will it take? So discouraged." Cosby was the first celebrity tried and convicted in the wake of the Me Too movement. And that's that, but yeah, I mean, it is tough, when stuff like this happens. I mean, do come forward if you have been assaulted, and do so immediately. Now, okay, I am a fan of Bill Cosby, don't get me wrong, and what he did was terrible, yes. However, if the victims come forward, then one, I don't think that there would be all of this pile up. Two, it'll give a short window of time for everything to come to pass. And yeah, so I might talk more about this later, but in the comment section below, leave your thoughts on this. Do you agree with that Cosby's conviction should be overturned? Do you not agree? Do you support the Me Too movement? And do you think that cancel culture has ruined men's lives? Leave a comment down below. I'll leave a list of links to the articles that I've read in the show notes, and I'll see you in the next video. Yesterday, the Supreme Court ruled 6-3 in favor of Arizona's voting regulations. This coming from my good friends over at townhall.com. And Madeline Leesman. Supreme Court upholds Arizona's voting regulations. Leftists lose their minds. On Thursday, the Supreme Court upheld Arizona's voting laws, challenged by the Democrat National Committee that target ballot harvesting and out-of-precinct voting, causing a liberal uproar on social media. In the ruling, the High Court ruled voted 6-3, siding with the Arizona Attorney General Mike Brnovich, that Arizona's voting laws are not discriminatory or in violation of the Voting Rights Act. The court upheld that votes cast in the wrong precinct would be thrown away and back to full-fledged ban on ballot harvesting. Chief Justice Roberts and Justices Alito, Kavanaugh, Gorsuch, Thomas, and Barrett held the majority. Voters who choose to vote in person on election day in a county that uses a precinct system must vote in their assigned precincts. Justice Alito wrote for the majority opinion. Having to identify one's own polling place and then travel there to vote does not exceed the usual burdens of voting. Liberal media moguls pounced on the news, claiming that the court's ruling perpetuates discrimination and gives Republicans more leverage to claim the 2020 election was stolen. One of the things that's left open to the possibility of voting rights laws that enacted with a discriminatory purpose in mind, said MSNBC guest Melissa Murray on air today. Much more of this kind of break is going to be sub rosa, much more subtle than it was in the Jim Crow era. I really think this is a gutting of this landmark civil rights legislation. Townhall.com tweeted out earlier today, MSNBC guest says that the discriminatory purpose of Arizona voting laws are going to be sub rosa, much more subtle than it was in the Jim Crow era. I think this really is a gutting of the landmark civil rights legislation. Mary wasn't the only mainstream media guest who pushed the narrative that the Supreme Court is upholding voting laws in a scheme to prevent minorities from voting. ABC News Live reported Devin Dwyer spoke on this subject, where he also corroborated the belief that voting rules, or restrictions as the liberal media has dubbed it, are rooted in discrimination. With all of these laws proliferating, making it harder for people to get absentee ballots, to wait in line at polling places, to drop off their ballots in future elections, Democrats and civil rights activists see discrimination, Dwyer said in the segment. It's going to be harder now for Democrats and civil rights advocates to challenge the state voting laws in court. The court system has been the sort of the last line of defense against this wave of voting laws passed just in the past few months in the wake of the 2020 election, in the wake of the lies pushed by President Trump and Republicans that there was widespread voter fraud, that this was somehow a botched election. On Twitter, numerous liberal lawmakers, reporters, and the like expressed their disappointment in the ruling, continuously noting how discriminatory it is to protect election integrity by disallowing ballot harvesting in and out of precinct voting. Adrian Fonts tweeted out, "Today's Supreme Court ruling is more than disappointing. It will disenfranchise Arizona voters and validate the baseless voter fraud mythology. Access to fundamental rights like voting should always be expanded, not restricted." Senator Alex Padilla tweeted out, "Make no mistake, 6 conservative Supreme Court justices just voted to make it even harder to protect black and brown Americans' right to vote." Tragically, this decision will only embolden voter suppression efforts across the country. It's time for Congress to step up. He also said that Congress must act to protect and expand voting rights for Americans. Ezra Levin tweeted out, "Any word about Arizona senators on what they think about the Supreme Court upholding voter suppression in their states? Any renewed commitment from them to protect the rights of their voters?" Representative Mondaire Jones tweeted out, "As the Supreme Court's assault on the Voting Rights Act continues, Congress can and must fight back. My new bill with Representative Ruben Gallego will undo the latest attack on the VRA by outlawing discriminatory voter suppression laws, like the ones the court just upheld in Brnovich." This in a reply to NPR, which says, "Breaking the Supreme Court is now the only remaining section of a 1965 Voting Rights Act, rendering the landmark civil rights law close to a dead letter. The 6-3 vote was along ideological lines, with the liberal justices dissenting." Stevie Van Zandt tweeted out, "Lots of bad news today, none worse so far than the Supreme Court upholding voting suppression, which will lead to more. Goes together with their terrible 2013 decision to cut the Voting Rights Act of '65. I've said it before, we need to stack the court now, 6 new members now." Other side of the aisle, plenty of Republican lawmakers expressed support of the Supreme Court's ruling. Governor Kristi Noem of South Dakota tweeted out, "I applaud the SCOTUS decision today in the Brnovich case. I argued for this result in my amicus brief supporting Arizona's common sense voting laws. We need to protect the precious right to vote, and Justice Alito defends this truth in his decision today. Nancy Mace tweeted out, Supreme Court upholds Arizona Voting Rights Act. There, I fixed it for you. This and a picture from U.S. politics that apparently was on Twitter. Supreme Court upholds Arizona voting restrictions, trending with Voting Rights Act and SCOTUS. Senator Melissa Melendez tweeted out the Supreme Court issued 2 critical rulings today. Arizona ballot harvesting limits were upheld, and the California nonprofit donor harassment law was struck down. It's a great day. Congressman Byron Donalds of Southwest Florida tweeted out, I am proud that the Supreme Court voted to uphold Arizona voting laws and reject the ludicrous claims that these laws are racist. The rule by law and our electoral process should be guided by law, not identity politics. This in a repost of town halls that says breaking the Supreme Court rules that Arizona voting rules do not violate the Voting Rights Act and were not enacted with a racially discriminatory purpose. Mark Brnovich tweeted out, I am thankful that the justices upheld states' ability to pass and maintain common sense election laws at a time when our country needs it most. He wrote this on Twitter at 10:16 yesterday. And I mean, I totally agree with that, but there are some on the left I don't. I have one from CNN, which I'll get to a little later, but first there's this from Vox.com. The Supreme Court just made Citizens United even worse. In its infamous decision in Citizens United versus USC or FEC in 2010, the Supreme Court tossed a bone to lawmakers seeking to regulate money in politics. With a few exceptions, Citizens United stripped the government of its power to limit the amount of spending on elections, especially by corporations. But the decision also gave the court's blessing to nearly all laws requiring campaigns and political donations to disclose their donors. They have now stripped most of the lingering meat off that bone. On Thursday, the court handed down a 6-3 decision in Americans for Prosperity Foundation v. Bonta, which flips U.S. or Citizens United's approach to disclosure laws on its head. Before Thursday, the court treated most disclosure laws as valid, and it typically only allowed plaintiffs who objected to such a law to seek an exemption from it, not to seek a court order striking down the law altogether. After Americans for Prosperity, there is now a presumption that all such laws are unconstitutional, although this presumption might be rebuttable in some cases. As Justice Sonia Sotomayor writes in a dissenting opinion, today's analysis marks reporting and disclosure requirements with a bullseye. The upshot is that wealthy donors now have far more ability to shape American politics in secret, and that ability is only likely to grow as judges rely on the decision in Americans for Prosperity to strike down other donor disclosure laws. Americans for Prosperity was bought by 2 conservative organizations, the Americans for Prosperity Foundation, a conservative advocacy group closely associated with the billionaire Koch brothers, and the Thomas More Law Center, a conservative law firm that claims they were formed to promote America's Judeo-Christian heritage against a California regulation requiring charities that wish to raise tax-deductible funds in Arizona to disclose their largest contributors to the state attorney general's office. So the actual law at issue in this case is fairly far afield from actual campaigns for political office. But Justice John Roberts' opinion for himself and his fellow conservative justices has broad implications for all donor disclosure laws. It writes a new legal standard that will allow many future changes to those laws to succeed, and it will also likely lead to sweeping victories for many of the plaintiffs in such suits. Americans for Prosperity destroys a consensus that used to exist between liberal and conservative judges or justices. Not long ago, there was a broad consensus that disclosure laws aren't just permissible but essential in a democracy, As Justice Antonin Scalia wrote in a 2010 opinion, requiring people to stand up in public for their political acts fosters civic courage, without which democracy is doomed. For my part, I do not look forward to a society which, thanks to the Supreme Court, campaigns anonymously and even exercises the direct democracy of initiative and referendum, hidden from public scrutiny and protected from the accountability of criticism. This does not resemble the home of the brave. While that consensus is now dead, much of the court's right flank spent the oral argument in Americans for Prosperity, rejecting Scalia's civic courage in favor of a kind of paranoia over cancel culture. Justice Neil Gorsuch warned that the government could demand to see your Christmas card list or to disclose your dating history to state regulators. Justice Samuel Alito spoke of vandalism, death threats, physical violence, economic reprisals, and harassment in the workplace directed against donors to an anti-LGBTQ campaign. Under the previous consensus, the one announced in Citizens United, disclosure laws would be upheld so long as there is a substantial relation between the disclosure requirement and a sufficiently important governmental interest. Moreover, while some disclosure laws might be vulnerable to challenge, the court typically only permitted as-applied challenges, meaning that the plaintiff could seek an exemption from a particular disclosure law, but the law would still apply to other individuals or organizations. In other words, most disclosure laws were valid, and the onus was on the donors who wanted secrecy to prove that they actually deserved it. The court's previous decisions, moreover, suggested that the bar for bringing such an as-applied challenge is fairly high. The seminal decision establishing that similar organizations must be exempted from disclosure laws is NAACP versus Alabama ex Albert Patterson, 1958, which was an attempt by the state of Alabama to force the NAACP, then the nation's preeminent civil rights organization, to disclose its membership. Had the NAACP done so, Alabama could have turned those names over to the Ku Klux Klan, among other things. The plaintiffs in Americans for Prosperity do allege that they were the victims of death threats and other sorts of inexcusable activity. Roberts points to a statement from someone working in the same building as the AAP Foundation, who said he could easily walk into the CEO's office and slit his throat. But nothing that even approaches the constant threat of terroristic violence that civil rights activists faced in the Jim Crow South. In any event, as Sotomayor writes in her dissent, she would be sympathetic to a decision that simply granted as-applied relief to these plaintiffs because of the threats they face, but the court goes much further, striking down California's disclosure rules in their face, meaning that they are now invalid for everyone. The court writes the legal standard governing disclosure laws, as mentioned above. Citizens United upheld that disclosure laws would be upheld so long as there is a substantial relation between the disclosure requirement and a sufficiently important governmental interest. Roberts' opinion abandons that standard, holding that disclosure laws must be newly tailored to advance the government's interest in requiring disclosure. Most first-year law students will immediately recognize the significance of those two words, narrowly tailored, as it is part of the test that the Supreme Court applies when it wishes to impose a very high presumption that certain laws are unconstitutional. The court, for example, imposes a narrow tailoring requirement on laws that discriminate on the basis of race. So Americans for Prosperity does not go quite far as it could have. It does not apply a test known as strict scrutiny, the most skeptical test the court applies in constitutional challenges. It comes pretty daggone close. When the court applies a narrow tailoring requirement, it signals that a law will typically be struck down if the government could advance its goal in some other ways. The practical impact of Americans for Prosperity is that all disclosure laws, including campaign disclosure laws, are now vulnerable if a plaintiff can think of some other hypothetical way that the government might have fostered the goal of the transparency. Roberts justifies such a result because he claims that disclosure requirements can chill association, even if there is no disclosure to the general public. He fears, in other words, a world in which donors will choose not to donate to groups like the Americans for Prosperity Foundation out of fear that their names will be disclosed. And then, of course, there is a shift from as applied to facial challenges. Rather than simply doling out exemptions to disclosure laws, courts are now much more likely to strike them down in their entirety. The decision is, simply put, a disaster for anyone hoping to know how wealthy donors influence American politics. Now, right there, you had seen two separate articles, one supporting the Supreme Court's law and one objecting to the Supreme Court's law. I mean, I've said it many times here, and I'll keep saying it. Politics is a dog-eat-dog world, and we're just wearing milk-bone underwear. But yeah, I mean it. I personally agree with that law simply because, number one, most of the election laws are, I wouldn't quite call them outdated per se, but some of them on paper might be good, but in all actuality, might need a little tweaking here and there. And now ballot harvesting, I disagree with. Another thing that I disagree with is the liberals saying that we need 6 new justices on the court now, which is akin to the court packing that we always hear about, and that many accuse the conservatives of doing. Court packing is when you add justices to the court above the number that's there now. Okay, like case in point is what FDR did back in the 1930s. He wanted, okay, I think the justices stood at 9. He wanted in it as much as 15 on there, just so there would be, justices that were more justices that would agree to most all of his New Deal regulations, even though Congress and most Americans did not want that. So, and yeah, and there's this from Hot Air and Jazz Shaw. SCOTUS upholds Arizona voting integrity laws. Arizona Democrats had sought to throw out 2 voting integrity laws passed in that state in 2016. Those laws have been used as a model for new laws passed in other states since the 2020 elections, so the precedent in this case could prove important. One of the laws states that only the voter, a member of the family, or their caregiver can deliver a completed ballot. The other law requires election officials to reject ballots cast in the wrong precinct. Today, the Supreme Court announced that they found the laws to be constitutional on the 6-3 vote. Be sure to note the spin that NBC News applies to their coverage of this story. The Supreme Court on Thursday upheld 2 election laws in the 2020 battleground state of Arizona that challengers said make it harder for minorities to vote. The case was an important test for what's left of one of the nation's most important civil rights laws, the Voting Rights Act of 1965, which the Supreme Court scaled back in 2013. A remaining provision allows lawsuits claiming that voting changes would put minority voters at a disadvantage in electing candidates of their choice. Civil rights groups were hoping that the Supreme Court would use the Arizona case to strengthen their ability to challenge the dozens of post-20 and 20 voting restrictions imposed by Republican legislatures in the wake of Donald Trump's defeat. We are once again seeing the media adopting the insulting language of the Democrats every time they don't like a new election law. saying that the laws make it harder for their minority or make it harder for minorities to vote. I've yet to hear a single person explain that rationale coherently. In the Arizona examples, the first law applies who can legally take a completed ballot to be submitted, limiting that choice to the voter themselves, their family members, or a caregiver. Now, is the plaintiff somehow claiming that minority voters don't have family members or the ability to get to their precinct? The second law rejects ballots cast in the wrong precinct. I'm sure that happens from time to time, but the assumption being made by the plaintiff seems to be that minority voters are not smart enough to locate the correct precinct while their white counterparts can manage the task. That's not a very good look. Now, regarding the second law, the plaintiffs had also claimed that officials move polling locations more often than in minority districts, leading to confusion or mistakes. There were already rules in place, however, describing when and how polling locations can be changed. If they have proof that election officials have been violating those laws, the answer isn't to scrap this law, it's to investigate and arrest the people doing the switching. Now, what we seem to be lacking, or what we seem to be seeing here, is another example of the Supreme Court sticking to their traditional precedent of leaving the specifics of voting rules up to the individual states as long as they don't prove to be discriminatory. That's probably the reason that the Democrats continually accuse Republican officials of discrimination in crafting voting laws. But it's whether the rule concerning who can deliver a ballot, which was passed to cut down on ballot harvesting, or a requirement to vote in your own precinct, those laws apply equally to everyone, regardless of race, gender, or any other demographic. Now that there are challenges bubbling up over new voting laws in Georgia and many other states, today's decision will probably prove important. The lower courts will need to consider this case as precedent when hearing the others. And that is so totally true. So right here, as it was said, the answer to proof is not to scrap the law, but to investigate and arrest the people doing the switching, which leads to, so we are seeing a lot of accusations of discrimination in crafting voting laws, but, it just boils down to simple common sense with all this, and with all of these voting laws. I know that Governor DeSantis had passed a voting law. I think it was restricting ballot harvesting or something of that sort. So the lower courts definitely will need to consider the Arizona cases by the Supreme Court from yesterday as precedent. So definitely take a look into that. And then there's this opinion piece from CNN, and it says, Supreme Court deals blow to American democracy. And this by Joshua Douglas, who is professor of the University of Kentucky's J. David Rosenberg College of Law. He specializes in election law, voting rights, and constitutional laws. He writes, 8 years ago, the Supreme Court gutted a major portion of the Voting Rights Act in its infamous Shelby County v. Holder decision, making it easier for states with a history of voter discrimination to enact new onerous voting rules. States like Georgia and Texas took notice, passing strict new voter ID laws, absentee ballot rules, and a host of other provisions that make it harder for some people to vote. The court just doubled down on that attack on the right to vote. The specific Arizona laws at issue in the Brnovich case, which the court just decided by a 6-3 vote that fell on predictable ideological lines, are less momentous than the rule that the court laid down for future Voting Rights Act cases. Still, while upholding the voting laws, the court made it much harder for voting rights advocates to protect against racial discrimination. Voting rights plaintiffs had filed suit against 2 Arizona laws, one that says that a vote will not count if a voter goes to the wrong precinct, and then, finding their name not in the poll books, fills out a provisional ballot. The other limits who can collect and return completed ballots, also known to opponents as ballot harvesting. The plaintiffs argue that the laws violated Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, which prohibits voting rules that have the effect of making it harder for minority voters to cast a ballot that will count. As expected, the court upheld both laws, reversing the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. The question wasn't whether the voting rights advocates would lose this case, it was how badly they would lose. They lost the whole ball game. To be sure, the court did not completely gut Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. Instead, the majority opinion delivered by Justice Samuel Alito is more subtle, offering 5 guideposts to construe the landmark civil rights statute. But each of these guideposts place significant hurdles on voting rights plaintiffs going forward, spelling bad news for equality and the right to vote. Put simply, it's death by 1,000 cuts. Alito said that in analyzing whether a law results in vote denial on the basis of race, courts should consider 1. The overall burden on voters, 2. Whether the voting law has been around for a long time, 3. The size of the impact on minority voters, 4. The state's overall election scheme, and 5. The state's interest in combating election fraud. Now, none of this is within the text of the Voting Rights Act. Section 2 simply says that if a law is invalid if voting is not equally open to racial minorities and if it provides less opportunity than other members of the electorate to participate in the political process. As Justice Elena Kagan wrote in her powerful dissent, the majority founds its decision on a list of mostly made-up factors at odds with Section 2 itself. For instance, whether a state has an interest in combating voter fraud, minuscule as it is, should have little bearing on the question of whether a law discriminates among voters. Now, whether some states have used the same rule for years should be irrelevant under the law. A law that currently produces a discriminatory effect harms voters in every election. Alito's opinion may also impact claims that a legislature passed a law with a discriminatory intent, which is the issue raised by Attorney General Merrick Garland's lawsuit filed last week against Georgia's new onerous voting law. Alito indicated that partisan motives are not the same as racial motives, meaning that a court could potentially reject the argument that race was Georgia's key motivation by focusing on the politics of the debate in the state legislature. There is no easy solution to this conundrum. Congress was considering the Vote for the People Act, which would require easy voting access across the country. But even though it passed the U.S. House of Representatives, it stalled at the U.S. Senate. Congress is also considering the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, but it is unclear if the bill has enough votes. State courts are still open to claims that voting laws violate state constitutions, and even after the court's decision, Section 2 is still able to ferret out the worst voting laws. Though the standard is now a lot tougher to meet, the court's decision is a stark reminder that it is no fan of voting rights. The thumb is firmly on the side of the states to regulate their elections as they wish, which in many places is bad news for American democracy. Number 1, we are not a democracy, we are a republic. In fact, we are a constitutional republic, and so nowhere in the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, the Declaration of Independence, and by Constitution I'm talking about the U.S. Constitution or the 50 state constitutions. You will not even find it listed in the Bill of Rights or other subsequent amendments. You won't even find it in the Federalist Papers. You won't find it in the debates on the Constitution, whether at the 1787 Philadelphia Convention or in individual state conventions thereafter. But so so yeah, I mean it's just mind-boggling that people say that that we are a democracy, and yeah, so that ran is secured. Now we move on to the Daily Signal, and this by Thomas Jipping and David Bainbridge. Supreme Court upholds freedom of association. What would it take for the American Civil Liberties Union and the Independent Women's Law Center, the People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals and the Gun Owners of America, and the Human Rights Campaign and the Proposition 8 Legal Defense Fund to be found in the same trench fighting the same opponent? Nothing less than the right to the freedom of association, which the Supreme Court has held as implicit in the First Amendment. In Americans for Prosperity Foundation v. Bonta, the Supreme Court on Thursday held by a 6-3 majority that California violated that right by demanding that charitable organizations disclose their major donors as a condition of fundraising in the state. Charitable organizations in California that solicit contributions are required by state law to register with the state and provide reports that include their federal IRS Form 990. Now, while most Form 990 information is public, federal law requires that Schedule B, which lists an organization's substantial donors, be kept confidential. Americans for Prosperity and the Thomas More Law Center refused to provide their Schedule Bs to the state and instead sued California. The risk of public disclosure of the sensitive document, they argued, violates the right of association, especially when California does not actually use it to investigate charitable misconduct. In a 1958 landmark decision titled NAACP v. Alabama, the Supreme Court unanimously held that requiring disclosure of a group's members may constitute as effective a restraint on freedom of association as other forms of government action. Not surprisingly, the NAACP joined an amicus brief defending the same principle in today's case. An important issue in the case was the legal standard that should be applied in such compelled disclosure cases. The tougher the standard, the closer the connection must be between what the government wants to do and its reason for doing it. The district court applied a standard called exacting scrutiny, which requires that government action be substantially related to a sufficiently important governmental interest. Now, this standard, according to the district court, further requires that the action must be narrowly tailored for the government's purpose. This is a rigorous standard meant to minimize the possibility that government actions deter people from exercising their First Amendment freedom of association. The U.S. Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit reversed the district after applying a more lenient version of this exacting scrutiny standard that did not require this narrowly tailored connection. The Supreme Court agreed with the district court that the state's actions must be narrowly tailored to the government's asserted interest. The Supreme Court found a dramatic mismatch rather than a close connection between California's dragnet for sensitive donor information and its claimed objective of preventing charitable fraud. California had not only previously failed to enforce its Schedule B disclosure requirement, but did not actually use that information when it investigated charities. Instead, the Supreme Court found that California's real reason for demanding this information was convenience. To simply have the information close at hand, just in case it might be useful. That was not nearly enough to justify the risk that the donor information might be disclosed. Justice Sonia Sotomayor, joined by Justices Stephen Breyer and Elena Kagan, wrote in dissent that the majority had actually abandoned, rather than applied the court's precedents. She argued that under those previous decisions, reporting and disclosure requirements do not directly burden associational rights, rather than the majority's holding that an upfront disclosure requirement automatically violated the First Amendment. The dissenters would look at whether a particular plaintiff's freedom of association had actually been affected. The majority took note of the hundreds of organizations spanning the ideological spectrum that had filed briefs supporting the plaintiff groups in this case. They emphasized the gravity of the privacy concerns that any advocacy group would face from disclosure of donors. The deterrent effect feared by these organizations, Chief Justice John Roberts wrote, is real and pervasive. The district court had cited evidence of pervasive Schedule B disclosures by the state as well as ample evidence that these particular organizations, their employees, and supporters could face hostility, intimidation, or harassment upon such disclosure. California's assurances of confidentiality, the Supreme Court said, are not worth much. Roberts concluded the court's opinion with this important admonition. When it comes to the freedom of association, the protections of the First Amendment are triggered not only by actual restrictions on an individual's ability to join with others to further share goals. The risk of a chilling effect on association is enough. And that's a freedom that we all can share. Now, I definitely agree with what Roberts had said and echo the Daily Signal's claim that what Roberts said is a freedom that we all can share. There's coming up this Sunday we will celebrate the 4th of July, which is the nation's Independence Day. So, as you celebrate Independence Day with your family, I ask that you do remember what the Patriots did back in 1776 in writing the Declaration of Independence, which, by the way, was actually passed today, but the first signature was on July 4th. I also ask that you bow your head in remembrance to all that the founders had done in preserving this. Leave a comment down below what you think about the Supreme Court's decisions in this case, or in the Brnovich case, as well as in the California case. I'll leave a link to the articles that I mentioned in the show notes down below, and I'll see you in the next video. And that's going to do it for the news for this week. I am Mick Bulow. Again, if you like what you watch, please go ahead and hit the thumbs up button. Also subscribe, and tell your friends, tell your neighbors, tell an enemy or two even. And I will be back next week. Until next time, peace.